Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Sara Lubratt, and today I'm going to be giving you guys a little bit of a writing pep talk. Whether you're just starting to write or if you've been writing for a while and you're kind of just like falling out of it because you keep overthinking things, I'm going to give you a little pep talk today. I'm also a little bit under the weather, so I apologize for that. But if you go on to enjoy today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the like button because that really supports my channel, and subscribe if this is somehow the first video you're seeing from me. And now let's get into the video. The whole idea for this video stemmed from a post that I saw on Threads from Brigid, Kemmerer, talking a little bit about Rebecca Yarros' sudden success. So I'm also going to put it up on screen, but I'm going to read this for you guys. Brigid Kemmerer was originally responding to this other post that said Rebecca Yarros wrote 20 books before the Empyrean series, 20 books before I ever heard her name, 20 books before her moment, 20 books, reminding myself of this today. And then Brigid Kemmerer responded and said, I've known Rebecca Yarros as an acquaintance for years because we've been at a Polycon together several times. Back in mid-2022, just when Fourth Wing started to really take over, we were at Imaginarium Book Fest together, and she was stressed about how to quickly get lunch without having to walk past all of the people camping in the halls. I was door dashing Chipotle with a friend, so we threw her order in too. When the food arrived, we sat there talking about how amazing it was that her new book was finding such an enthusiastic readership. She said, I'm not used to this, Brigid. I didn't start with a big release like you did. I was a bit shocked. I stared at her and said, I didn't start with a big release either. Curse was my 9th published book. She stared back at me surprised. We had a moment. A good moment, lol. If you look at your favorite authors, in almost all cases, that breakout book is not their first book. Colleen Hoover had a huge backlist. Suzanne Collins had written plenty of books in the middle grade space. Sarah J. Maas wrote most of the Throne of Glass series before ACOTAR. The list goes on and on. This industry often relies on luck and timing combined with talent, but a lasting career as an author also requires persistence, dedication, and tenacity. Keep writing. I loved this, and I obviously saved the link because I was like, this is important and I need to talk about this because I know I'm not the only person who needs this reminder. I also recently watched Jojo Moyes' BBC Maestro course, and in that she kind of talks about this same concept where the book that blew up for her was Me Before You, and she talks about how that book was her 9th published book. So not only had she written 8 other books and published them, she had also written a couple others that never got published. As a culture, we've really moved into instant gratification rather than delayed gratification. So we're so focused on the dopamine hit that we get from scrolling on Instagram, and our brains have become so programmed to wanting something immediately, and we lose the focus on the fact that things take time, especially good things taking time. When some people run into failure, no matter how big or small, they can sometimes talk themselves out of whether or not they should keep going because they've already met resistance. Especially in publishing, you have to be at the right place at the right time, and the best way to do that is to keep writing and keep showing up. Some other examples include Picasso, who created over 1,800 pieces of art, but only about 30 of those are widely recognized. Thomas Edison patented 1,093 inventions, but the light bulb was his most famous. Even Elvis wrote 710 songs, but 40 of those became worldwide hits. So if Elvis had stopped at some point and not continued in his craft, odds are that we would not know who he is today. C.S. Lewis was rejected 800 times before he got his first book published, and we wouldn't have the Chronicles of Narnia today if he didn't keep going. Even Stephen King faced 30 rejections with his horror novel Carrie, and reportedly he got so frustrated with all of the rejections that he actually threw his manuscript in the trash, where his wife later found it and convinced him to keep submitting. When Carrie was first published in hardback, he sold 13,000 copies of the hardback cover in the first year, and then when the paperback version came out, he sold over 1 million copies in the first year of the paperback being out. And as we all know, Stephen King is now a huge success, having sold over 350 million books with multiple film adaptations. Beatrix Potter, author of The Tale of Peter Rabbit, got rejected a number of times and decided to self-publish her work by printing 250 copies that she shared with family and friends way back in December of 1901, and then later down the road, one of the publishers she had originally offered the book to chose to pick up the book after hearing about how much people loved it, and since then has sold over 45 million copies. I went on a writing retreat last fall, and of the 9 of us that went, there were several published authors in our group, and something that a couple of them kept talking about, which was both inspiring and a little bit disheartening, was that the best way to get somebody to buy your first book is to write a second one. In reality, for most authors, they don't start getting big sales numbers until they've put out several books. And part of that is just the beauty of having a backlog, because if somebody finds your book and they find out that you have one book, hopefully they will stick around until you publish your next book, but you have better odds at them reading more immediately. Again, kind of that instant gratification. If If you already have an existing backlist where somebody picks up one of your books, whether it's your second or your 17th, and they like the book and they want to read more from you, whether that book is a series or you've just published other works, it's a lot easier to get one reader to read multiple of your books than it is to get multiple readers to each read one of your books. It's a little bit of the concept of more is more, but readers consume books so quickly that the more you have out there and the longer your backlog is, even if that's just one book other than what they're currently reading, you're gonna do better. I think there was a statistic that I'm not gonna look up now and I'm just gonna do my best to recite. There was a statistic that I found a couple years ago that it takes authors an average of 11 published books. It was either 11 or 14 to make the New York Times bestseller list, which my gut reaction to that is, oh, that's so many. And then like immediately my brain flips and is like, well, that just means we get to keep writing. Like we just get to keep writing and we get to keep publishing books. I haven't started yet. I'm working on it in order to get to that number. And yes, that's an average. Some people find it before, some people find it later, but you have a higher chance of getting there if you keep showing up for your writing. So now that we've talked a little bit about how you need to keep showing up for yourself, let's talk about if you are actually struggling to start showing up in the first place, or if you're overall just getting disheartened with how long the process actually takes. One of the biggest things that I see with myself and other authors is comparing our first drafts, our incredibly rough zero drafts where we are just trying to get that story down on paper, to a polished, published book that you can find in a bookstore. Even though that isn't how it works for anybody, we can talk ourselves into believing that those authors wrote that on their first try, and that our rough drafts do not compare to those because our rough drafts look messy, when in reality, we think that because we didn't experience the struggles that that author went through when they were writing their book. We don't know how many drafts they went through. Some authors are transparent about that, which is great. You can sometimes look that up. But even if you hear that somebody went through 4 or 11 drafts, you don't get to see or experience the struggles that they went through. You don't get to see what they cut out. You don't get to see how many different paths the story had to take before they finally figured out how the story was actually going to go. You don't understand how many times an author stared at a wall when they were writing that book. You don't know how many times the author cried because they couldn't figure it out. But because we are not actively experiencing the same struggle that that author went through for that book, we often don't understand that it actually took them a very long time with a lot of effort to figure it out. There's a quote that I've looked for and now I cannot find who said it, but it goes like this: comparing your rough draft to a published book is like comparing an acorn to an oak tree. You don't get to see how much growth that story had to go through to get to its final state. We don't get to see how many times somebody had to go through edits and revisions and alpha readers and beta readers and editors and proofreaders before a book is finally out in the world for all of us to read it. It takes time and a lot of freaking effort. One of my favorite quotes is, you can edit a bad page, but you can't edit a blank page. Similar to that, but phrased a little bit more nicely, is this quote up here on my writing motivation board by Shannon Hale that says, "I'm writing a first draft and reminding myself that I'm simply shoveling sand into a box so that later I can build castles." You have to start with something, because if there's nothing on the page, you can't make it better. And I know you might be saying, but Sarah, their idea is better than mine. But you have to remember that you are having your own ideas and there's somebody else, at least somebody else out there, that thinks that they could not write your story idea and they're jealous of your idea because they could never come up with something like that. One of the beautiful things about being a human being is that all of our imaginations are different. We all have such different ideas, and even if 2 people had the same idea, the execution of those ideas would be very different. I'm currently editing this video and I'm realizing that I totally left out our own ideas can sometimes feel dull in comparison because of how much we've thought about our book ideas, whereas we are hearing someone else's idea for the first time. Or even if we're hearing it for the 5th time, it's still way fewer and therefore seems way more novel and new and exciting than our own ideas that we've thought about like literally hundreds, if not thousands of times. There's also something to take into consideration about the concept of our own ideas. And I saw this on Instagram too that said, people hate their own art because it looks like they made it. They think if they get better, it will stop looking like they made it. A better person made it, but there's no level of skill beyond which you stop being you. You hate the most valuable thing about your art. So if you don't think that your idea is good, there's a high chance that you don't like it because it's your own idea. People will think that they need their ideas to be better because they're comparing it to somebody else's imagination or creativity. And I'm sure that that person is then also having those same feelings about other artists, where they see somebody else's idea and they're like, darn, I wish I would have thought about that. Like, how did they come up with that? But again, you're not experiencing what they had to go through in order to brainstorm that story idea. You don't know how many other ideas they had to let slide so that they could focus on this one. We tend to not think about the struggles that somebody else might have gone through in order to get to that idea, especially if an idea seems fully fleshed out. We always just assume, and I'm speaking broadly, you might not think this, but I definitely think this, where when I hear somebody's really good idea, I'm like, darn, how did they come up with that immediately? And it's almost never immediately. They had to put in a lot of time, a lot of work to flesh out that idea. They might have just had it like percolating in their brain for a couple of years to get to that point where it's finally sounding like a fleshed out idea. They probably had a lot of days of frustration where they were running into plot holes and trying to figure out characters. We compare our own struggles to assuming that somebody else got it immediately. And in that same vein, we might think that somebody else's idea sounds really good because it's our first time hearing it. Whereas with our own ideas, we've been working on them for a while, so they're not new to us. We're very familiar with the concept. It kind of loses its novelty and interest because we've been working with it for so long. So something that I've run into with my own creative process is thinking that one of my book ideas seems really obvious and not that interesting, when in reality, it's because I've been working on this book for like 9 years. And I didn't have this idea yesterday. So part of someone else's book sounding really interesting to us is just the newness of it. And again, that means new to us if it's our first time hearing it, or even if it's our 5th time hearing about it. If you're talking to one of your writing friends, they're in it like almost every single day. At least some part of their brain has been working away at it. So even if that idea sounds really new to us, to them, they've put a lot of time and effort into figuring it out. And to them, it probably feels not as interesting or new or exciting because they've been working on it for a long time, where they might again hear somebody else's idea and feel the same way of like, darn, how did they come up with that so quickly? Apparently I forgot to close out this video. But you are not alone in these feelings. You're doing an amazing job. This is my encouragement to you to keep writing. Remember that progress is progress, and every step you're taking is in the right direction. Good luck and happy writing. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm Sara Lubratt. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.